Thank you very much. This is a presentation that is about the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency's program, the Shared Resources Program, which to us would provide an interoperable emergency communication process without having to use vulnerable normal infrastructure. A little bit about me. I've been a licensed amateur radio operator since 1955. I'm older than dirt. Formerly director of development of a university here in Nashville called Vanderbilt. Retired from a network design and consulting company where I was part of an owner, but mainly employed for 21 years. Currently, I'm Williamson County, Tennessee EMA Reserve. I worked with the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency as a COMU and Emergency Services Coordinator, specializing in WinLink. I'm a member of FEMA RECWIC Region 4, 5, and 10, and I serve on the as chair of the OXCOM subcommittee for FEMA Region 4, RECWIC, the Regional Emergency Communications Coordinating Working Group. I'm co-founder of the WinLink Global Radio Email System. I can't claim that I've written one line of code, but I have put it in front of users and tried to make it a viable option for those that want to use it. I'm the immediate past president of the Amateur Radio Safety Foundation, which is a 501c3 organization that funds and runs WinLink. I'm currently on their board and a member of the WinLink development team and the WinLink administrator for all of its services. A disclaimer, I'm a volunteer who supplies a system gratis. I do not speak for CISA or our U.S. government. The Shared Resources Program is a high-frequency radio program that provides an alternate communication pathway for users with a security and emergency preparedness mission. We can add VHF onto that HF as well. Now that we're getting more authorities having jurisdiction in larger areas, it's very difficult to put HF radio in downtown LA. So we do have a VHF option that integrates with everything else that WinLink does. SysShare's purpose is to support interoperable emergency communication by radio for security and emergency preparedness through our continuity of government. Continuity of government are all levels of government. We want to ensure that our governance and essential functions continue to perform before, during, and after any emergency where it may be needed. The Share's mission, which I think is just terrific, is to its member agencies is to support their mission. So we're a service here to support those authorities having jurisdiction that do deploy for emergencies, and we utilize WinLink for that purpose. How did this all get started? There was a presidential order in 1984, I believe, under Ronald Reagan, that assigned the National Security Emergency Preparedness telecommunication functions, one of which was to provide a high-frequency radio program as an additional means and a resilient means to provide communication when normal communication infrastructure was defunct. The update to that executive order occurred in 2012, I believe, under President Barack Obama. And today there are agencies at all levels of government and their critical infrastructure partners utilizing the Shares resource. This includes agencies like agency-linked volunteer resources consisting mostly of The shared resource has approximately 2,800 participants at 3,000 stations. The Shares Radio email network has approximately 117 radio message servers that scan 24 times 7 from 5 to 6 frequencies covering the HS spectrum. And we have approximately over 100 different frequencies to cover that usable spectrum. Interoperability and resiliency are the key to the shares process, especially shares WinLink. Federal, state, county, National Guard, state guard, tribal governments, non-government organization, critical infrastructure, supply chains, and assistance through the Emergency Management Alliance Compact are all part of the shares process. Shares WinLink has a common ground for communicating complex, rich messages. There are multiple services provided by Shares. The Shares WinLink Hybrid Radio Email Network, which I'm going to talk a lot about tonight. And then there's also the Shares sponsored voice networks. There's a national ALE network and a non-ALE voice network. There are regional Shares voice networks that are non-ALE. And most recently, states have chosen to provide their own networks on the appropriate frequencies, mainly ALE, but some non-ALE voice networks, California, Idaho, Florida, etc. They're all starting now to be able to provide more resiliency in their planning by using HF radio. There's a low and high frequency alerting system which provides real-time over-the-air emergency readiness notices. But this presentation mainly is going to be about Shares WinLink and how it interacts with agencies and volunteer resources to provide a service. Here's a look at military, Title 10 military agencies, some of the agencies that are related to Shares WinLink. The Mars services and the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary, they're heavy in volunteer resource use. So some of you may be involved with that. There's Title 32 or civilian participants in Shares at all levels of government. I'm looking here at TSA that has over 100 locations on the system. If you look down the list there, you'll see the ones that are bold and have an asterisk use volunteer resources. Okay, so why CISA Shares? What happens? I mean, we're talking about earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, flood, ice storms, wildfires, etc., or any disturbance of normal email distribution. It could be as simple as the Exchange server in your building going out, all the way to a mass casualty event. The commonality is that there's little or no notice. There's usually extensive damage to critical infrastructure and communication systems, especially normal email. Significant impacts on response and recovery resources, and it takes quite a while sometimes, even for the simplest issue, to get resolved. So looking at landline, cell phones, sat phones, land mobile radio networks, all of these depend on vulnerable infrastructure, which depend on power, water, fuel, and people. So they don't always have to be mass casualty events. If I'm looking here at the Nashville, Tennessee bombing, one street in downtown Nashville had a hole blown into it, and look at the damage that was done from a simple, relatively low impact but highly publicized event. Again, a farmer on the border of North and South Carolina ran over a fiber optic cable and blew out most of Region 5 up there in the Northeast, a lot of California, a lot of the southeast and south. So it doesn't have to be a mass casualty event. And those little events like that, if you could call them a little event, occur maybe not on a daily basis, but continually. So looking at the worst case scenario here, landline, cell phones, no dial tone, no last mile, sites damaged, destroyed, no power, sat phones overloaded, no email, public safety damaged or reduced capacity. And let's look at amateur radio resources. Where you live, it may not happen. We have formal infrastructure for emergencies. And if you're not involved in one of the agencies that's involved with that formal infrastructure, you're not going to be involved. It could be possibly limited due to competing fragmented volunteer resources, disassociated from their authority having jurisdiction. It could be problems with FCC Part 97 restrictions. You can't obscure data. You have a lot of problems if you're getting paid. You have to have a pretty high license requirement. For some agencies, it's just not in the current plan. Maybe they have no trust because of a past incident, or they just are lazy, frankly. So the obvious history of disaster responses have identified sustained essential functions are dependent on the availability of resilient communication systems, alternate systems, systems that have very little impact on the infrastructure. And those systems usually call for extraordinary technical talent. And amateur radio operators have that talent when it comes to managing HF radio. But is your agency, your nearby agency, willing to manage you? Does the agency require that you be NIMS trained or certified? And if so, to what extent? Do you get any benefit for the service? Do they give you a T-shirt? It's not required, but it certainly makes sense because you're working with them because you want to, not because you're getting paid. So looking at an agency and saying, does your PACE plan have a last resort resiliency? That is, does your primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency communication plan have the depth necessary if something really catastrophic takes place? So normal, everyday infrastructure, public safety, land mobile radio, ambulance services, taxi cab services, weather broadcasts, etc. What happens when those disappear? You bring in conventional backup equipment like cells on wheels and portable public safety systems and Starlink or other satellite systems, and they're limited in their capacity, especially in a mass casualty event. Sometimes they're hard to get to. Sometimes they can't be brought in right away. So what do you do? What's the option? Well, one of the things that Shares is recommending is that they consider the use of HF radio or VHF radio, both for voice services and for bridging over the radio to get to the internet email system somewhere else that's not in trouble. So that last resort resiliency is something that's critical. It doesn't cost much money. It's rarely used, and it's often forgotten until it's needed, and then it's too late. I just threw this in here. This is a picture that was sent over WinLink from a Kentucky ice storm that blanketed out communication completely for the entire western half of Kentucky. And this was a recon picture that Tennessee Emergency Management took when it went from south to north in western Kentucky. And you can see why they don't have any communication infrastructure. So shares, no fee, no service fee, no usage fee. You don't need a license. Strong recommendation is to use National Incident Management System, highly qualified volunteer resources, already familiar with the WinLink system and taking the trouble to learn the incident command system, allowing agency personnel more time to do things that volunteers can't do. Volunteers can do a lot of things to assist an agency. They can put diesel fuel in a tower generator. They can keep the cache batteries running, etc. The cost of WinLink network backbone for all WinLink services and software and operations are provided by volunteer registration. It doesn't affect the functionality if you don't register, but it helps us when you do. That's the extent of it. And we get donations as well. The user cost for everything needed is less than one Motorola P25 handheld. So when an agency says, we'd love to, but we just don't have the financial resources, you can remind them of that. What are the communications options? Scheduled HF voice nets. There's conventional and ALE voice nets. As I said earlier, we're moving toward intrastate nets. There's a Central United States Earthquake Consortium net that's weekly that takes place, and there's other agency-specified nets on shares throughout the country. SysShare's WinLink hybrid radio email network has approximately 110 scanning radio message servers that are available with or without the internet. They're used when the internet email system is not readily available for two purposes. One, to bridge to the email system over radio, and the second, which is becoming much more popular, is to be used to provide situational ground truth awareness to jurisdictions, whether it be a county or a FEMA region or the nation. We've had several exercises in the last couple of months, state and regional exercises where situational awareness ground truth was provided by WinLink. And the after action reports are available. Don't have time to go over it right now, but it's working. There's no SCC Part 90 type accepted need for expensive equipment because there's no SCC Part 97 or there's no SCC Part 90. The federal frequencies are provided by the NTIA and the FCC is not involved. It's perfect for a volunteer resource to work with agencies. They're working with a proven system that the agencies have proven works. And it's just a matter of building a relationships and getting in there and getting the job done. I brought this to your attention because when we think about commercial or military, we think about commercial and military equipment, which is Part 90 type accepted. It's very expensive. If you look over there at the Red Cross headquarters, at the radio that's involved there, that is a commercial radio on the right. The Idaho National Labs, TSA, by the way, that was when they gave a demonstration to Congress on the congressional lawn there. That's why the little guy's dressed in a uniform. But the point is, if you look at all the rest of these, Tennessee National Guard, they're all amateur radio equipment, with the exception of over there on the right-hand side. And the reason why that isn't is because it has a dual purpose. It's also used for Part 90 FCC HF frequencies. So that's a blessing that we don't have to comply to a restriction that would put us in the poorhouse. So Why not amateur radio? Why am I pushing shares here? And why am I talking to amateur radio operators mainly about shares? If you look at what the FCC stated a few years ago, and this is verbatim part 97.1, while the value of the amateur radio service to the public as a voluntary, non-commercial communication service, particularly with respect to providing emergency communications, is one of the underlying principles of the amateur service. However, the amateur service is not an emergency radio service. For hams interested in EMCOM, such as shares can optimize their value through this program by becoming involved with a member agency. If the member agency is willing to provide the proper management, oversee the proper training, and provide the proper incentives, volunteer resources can have a great value, not only to that agency, but the community that that agency supports. And it's proven every day. So let's look at the specifics. I mean, I made a statement there. For EMCOM trained amateur radio volunteer, what can shares provide in addition to that provided on the ham spectrum? So we look at the amateur spectrum. We cannot obscure the content of data per 97.113. Shares WinLink is encrypted from one end to the other. All of its transmissions are using AES 256 government standard encryption so that they can't be copied. And the reason why they could be copied is because we have to publish our compression algorithm on the WinLink website and make it open because we cannot obscure data. So that requires us to encrypt when we're not on the ham side. There's no channelization on amateur radio. None. So if you're on a frequency, it's either you or the other guy. And sometimes it's not malicious, it's propagation. If you look at shares, there's no license needed. It's hard to get an amateur radio license relative to not having to have one at all. You don't have to sit and wait for the ham to show up in order to use the radio when you have a system crisis. There's no pecuniary interest rule. In other words, if you're not a government agency or if you've gone past a certain number of hours and you are a government employee, you are not allowed to operate because you're being paid. There's no such thing on the shares resource side. And again, there's channelization. There's no gaps in the spectrum. There's nothing between 80 and 60 and 40 and 20, etc. On shares, it's every single bit of the spectrum is used. And sometimes that's necessary when you're attempting to grab a certain distance. And the main thing here, as far as I'm concerned, is there's direct interoperability with other communication resources, which is not permitted on the ham band. So WinLink is an exception to that. If I am a ham and I want to email a shares member at winlink.org, I can do that as long as I abide by the Part 97 rules. Likewise, if I'm in shares and I want to send a message to an amateur radio operator and he can pick it up over the amateur, over Part 97 spectrum, he can do that. But I have to be aware of the limitations of amateur radio so he doesn't get in trouble. She doesn't get in trouble. So none of that's required with NTIA channels on shares. With WinLink, shares users on federal NTIA channels may email anyone. This interoperability is really key, as long as both shares members and agencies and other services remain aware of their regulatory considerations. What if the internet is attacked and unavailable anywhere? Well, Shares WinLink can operate in what's called a radio-only mode, which is simply a large mesh network that our friend Phil Sherrod, who's with us tonight, built, and it works without the use of the internet. It works by algorithms that look at propagation and look at where the radio message servers are and relay till they get to a final destination. So Shares WinLink has propagation flexibility in that spectrum, and it does use HF and VHF channelized frequencies, and it does have automatic assistance for people who are not technically savvy, so that you can push a button and it does all the work for you. It finds the frequency, it sends the message, etc. So again, looking at the attributes of Sister Shares WinLink, it's managed by civil authorities at all levels of government and non-government organizations. It is a true emergency service. Agencies are encouraged to use volunteer resources when they're available, and they're usually hams. No license is required for operation under member agency management, but it's usually the hams that are helping the agency personnel understand how to operate an HF radio, especially one that's not type accepted, that's an amateur radio equipment that they're familiar with. Security is not an issue. There's no restriction on obscuring the meaning of data. Transmissions are in the AES 256 protected, encrypted. Network is coordinated and managed and monitored nationwide. It's consistent network infrastructure, more than 115, more than that now, HF and VHF nodes. Radio only is stable as a last resort option. It's got tremendous flexibility in frequencies for any distance. And it's commonly used now for both incidents and exercises. This is a picture of 24-hour connectivity in the WinLink system for all services, not just Shares. I just put that in there so I could brag. This is the WinLink Shares radio message server map. On the right is the PACTOR protocol, PACTOR 4, and on the left is the Vera HF protocol. Now, a lot of these RMSs have both, and Vera is new, and I'm confident that Vera will, everybody that's running PACTOR will soon be running Vera. Vera is a lot less expensive than PACTOR. It allows the amateur who's not particularly NIMS qualified or savvy to provide information about his region, much like you would have in Skywarn. And that's become very popular. We had a recent Did You Feel It exercise that had over 1,600 participants. We had a Region 4, Region 6 exercise. It was a cyber attack exercise. We had over 1,006 participants. It's gaining popularity. So how does a volunteer succeed with EMCOM? It's imperative that they build a relationship between somebody in that agency that they want to work with and themselves. And they do that mainly by introduction and by attending mutual classes. So in your area, wherever you are, they're going to have technical assistance catalog courses provided by the federal government, paid to the state, and the state then hosts these these classes. ICS 300 and 400 and COML come to mind. Now, why would you go to something like that? Oxcom is a great course. The Oxcom course is another course, but it's hams talking to hams. When you enter these other courses, ICS 300, 400, COML, COMT, you're going to be working with the people that you want to work with in real life. You're going to be team building. You're going to be practicing. You're going to be talking and building a relationship. You're going to have lunch together. Maybe you have a beer after the session's over. It doesn't matter. You're building a relationship with these people. They know who you are when you leave. They trust you or they don't. At least they're aware that you're there. So it's a lot easier to get into the agency and provide some assistance if they know who you are. One thing that agencies do, the smart ones, they don't use ARIES, they don't use RACES, they don't use CRU or ACS or any of the other acronyms. What they do is they form their own reserve program, and then they can cherry pick from all of these agencies without getting into a political nightmare and have the best of all possible world. That's what the smart agencies do. Agencies use volunteer resources. They've got to set the agenda for training. Hopefully, they set a pretty stiff agenda so that at least you know where to check into an incident and what to do when you get there. Because it's usually too late to bring in an unknown stranger, a hero, during some disaster or during recovery. That doesn't happen anymore. It's a very organized process. In fact, it's one of the few organized processes that I've seen different levels of government fully cooperate with each other. It's remarkable. Agencies do need to assist with the management and training of volunteer resources. They need to pick a leader. Not a manager, but a leader, somebody who can make things happen and keep the agency's desires and qualifications in mind when they're dealing with their volunteer resources. For HAMS, CISA SafeCom's National Council of Statewide Interoperability Coordinators sanctions the only OXCOM course for certification under the FEMA National Qualification System. So looking at OXCOM, some people look at OXCOM as an organization and they compete with it. OXCOM's not an organization. OXCOM is a function or a task on the NIMS ICS chart. So it'll pay great dividends when you're trained properly. If you look here, there's the new organization chart for the incident command system, and there it is. Whoops. It's a task, a function, not a competitive organization. And it encompasses everything. It encompasses ARRL, ARES. It encompasses RACES. It encompasses anything that you would call yourself, any label you have as a volunteer resource for communication. So I've got a golden rule here that was provided to me because I needed it at the time by a man who is a pretty well-known OXCOM instructor. And you can read this. You don't need me to read it. Essentially, what he's saying is that we don't command anything. When we represent whatever organization we're representing, whether we're a federal agency, a professional, or whether we're representing a ham club or a ham organization, when we go into an incident or into the EOC, we can work for the agency that we're an employee of or volunteer resource for, but we don't report to them anymore. We report to the pit boss, or we report to the incident command. And that really is important, because by doing that, you have continuity, you have operational leverage without any ambiguity in the chain of command. And we're providing a functional service, and we're not commanding anybody in any way. I hope that makes some sense. So bottom line, HF mobile radio and tuner and antenna, about $1,600. Pactor 4 modem, $2,000. Vera HF FM, $69. Our ability to send email when other means are not available, priceless. Thank you. Are there any questions? Is there anybody here?
Steve, one of the questions was who can get a shares call sign? Why don't you talk about who that process of agencies joining shares and hams under agencies and so forth? Basically, who is eligible to get a shares call sign?
Okay. All right, let me get everything together here. Essentially, to get a shares call sign, you've got to be either a legitimate agency. By that, I mean you have to be either a non-government organization like the American Red Cross, a common carrier like AT&T, or you have to be a government agency at some level of government, either a county, a parish, a state, or a federal agency. However, there are some exceptions, and the exceptions are, one, you can be requested to provide a service for an agency, and it's up to that agency to provide call signs for you. That agency actually has the authority to manage you as a resource, just like it would an authority to manage a police radio for a policeman on the beat. So a call sign is not issued to an individual. A call sign is issued to a station location. So there are no individuals with call signs. There are station locations. And you could call some certain circumstances exceptions, but for the most part, that's the way that is. Now, there's also, if you become a radio message server SysOp, you can become what's called a shares auxiliary member, which means that the shares organization, CISA, the Department of Homeland Security, will sponsor you, and they become your agency. But those exceptions are rare. The best thing you can do if you want to really be of service and not be a professional ham is to get involved with your nearby agency, emergency agency, and see if there is a willingness on their part through maybe an existing organization or an actual conversation with these people, if they won't bring you in. And this would be an excellent vehicle for them to manage you as a resource. Does that answer that, Phil?
Yeah, I think so. I think universities in some cases can join too. Didn't Hilton get his shares call sign from Belmont or
Yeah, well, I
one of
mean,
those?
universities are also government and non-government organizations. A university like Vanderbilt, for example, has a huge hospital. The University of Birmingham in Alabama has a radio message server, a huge hospital. But that's just another agency that you would be deploying for or you would be working with. Right. Are there any other questions? I see Barry, are there questions in chat?
Don from Washington wants to know what would be your thoughts on the use of Starlink to back up email servers in the Shares network?
Well, the more resilient the internet is, the better it's going to be. Now, do you need WinLink if you have Starlink? Well, it depends. You might have Starlink out in the middle of nowhere, and the only way you're going to get that information in is through WinLink. It just depends. There's any access to internet, whether it be Starlink, whether it be Comcast, whether it be AT&T, regardless, whether it be a a phone service, an iPhone, um, uh, anything that can provide you access to the SMTP mail system, even if it's over radio, is where you're trying to get.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Bill from Washington wants to know, how do you apply a station license to a mobile app?
Well, whether it's fixed or whether it's mobile, it still belongs to the agency, and the agency they have different types of call signs, but really they're all equivalent. If you want to put a call sign and assign it to a drop kit or a mobile command vehicle, you still have a base location that is assigned to and a person who handles that base location. So there's really no difference whether it's fixed or mobile.
Okay. Yeah, it's assigned. Okay. Now, also, Bill says he already has a relationship with his local DEM. Can he get a station call sign for his radio? Also, is there a maximum number of call signs available to the county, or a county, I guess?
Well, an authority having jurisdiction, whether it's a county, a state, or a federal government, knows how many call signs it needs. It knows what its requirements are. It isn't shares that doesn't know those requirements. It tells shares what it needs, and then the shares, the SPO then provides what it needs to that individual within reason. A county that wants 10 call signs most likely has a reason for that. They probably have volunteer resources like Bill, and they may want to let Bill have a call sign so he can practice and train others. They may have command vehicles that they don't use every day, where they want to have a particular call sign assigned to that vehicle. The same with drop kits. They may have a drop kit that they want to deploy or send somewhere else through the Emergency Management Alliance Compact. They may want to send it to another state. But so that call sign's got to travel with that drop kit. So the number is dependent upon the need of the agency.
Okay. Phil answered one about city governments getting involved in shares, and he suggests they could be.
Well, usually the shares discourages city participation. Now, if you're Los Angeles or New York City, or if you're in a city that the county is 90, you're it. That's it. New Hampshire, Manchester comes to mind. Providence, Rhode Island comes to mind. But 99% of the time, shares discourages a city becoming involved. They would much rather have the county involved.
That's reasonable. Okay. That's all the questions in chat.
Okay.
Gene, you had your hand up earlier. Do you still want to come on?
I have
Yes, I think you may have. I think you may have already answered my questions, but I'm a member of Texas Races, also the county Office of Emergency Management as a volunteer or reservist communicator. So I'm guessing that falls under those government agencies you were talking about that may have that license for shares. Is that correct?
I'm not understanding you. Could somebody repeat that? Though it was muffled.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry about that.
It's all right.
I'm a member of Texas Races and a county Office of Emergency Management. Safe to say that those would qualify as
Oh, yes. Yeah.
government agencies that would be associated with shares?
Yeah. You said Texas?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a man named Kevin Lemon who's your ESF2
Oh, yeah.
in Austin, and he's
Yep.
also got a guy who's a volunteer named Roy Walker, and Roy Walker is your RACES officer, and they have somebody called Kevin Dunlevy, I think that's his name, and he is the shares representative. Speak to him, but the main person you want to speak to is your county. because the county holds precedence in the county over the state. You're a home rule state, and your county is your authority having jurisdiction. So if you're a volunteer of the county, what you want to do is talk to your county about obtaining a shares license, because the state having one is not going to help a bit if you have an incident in your
Okay.
county and you're down for the count.
Okay. The last question I have is, how does APRS fit in with this communication structure when it comes to shares?
WinLink has a capability of putting crude messages on APRS. I say it doesn't. It has nothing to do with shares. WinLink, APRS has its benefits, obviously, but as far as shares goes, there's no direct relationship. The direct relationship is where you are and who knows you're there.
Okay, thank you very much for that information.
Sure.
All right, anybody else out there?
Yeah, question.
Okay, please raise your hand.
Okay. This is KB8AY, Steve.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
I don't have a raise my hand button on this phone. Is it safe to say that if I'm a volunteer with the county emergency assistant emergency coordinator, mostly Skywarn type stuff, but I have nodes up for both Tri-Mode and RMS Packet. If my county said, hey, we could use your help as shares, we'll get a license for you, would I end up having to have two complete radio setups?
No, because WinLink has the capability, WinLink Express has the capability of using one piece of software that can put any service on. Shares is not the only non-amateur service. The Canadian government has two non-amateur services. The Australian government has non-amateur. New Zealand has non-amateur. UK has non-amateur. International Red Cross has non-amateur. It's like you have an iPhone and I have an iPhone, and we don't know each other exists, but we both use the same cloud. Likewise, Shares has that capability, and WinLink Express has the capability to separate all that.
So if I put relay on my machine where RMS Packet and Tri-Mode live, what call sign would I put on relay? My ham call sign or the one that the agency assigned to me?
If you're operating as a Shares station,
Yep.
you use the Shares call sign. If you're and you're operating under the NTIA rules, you use the Shares call sign. If you're operating as an amateur radio operator, you change your call sign in WinLink Express to the ham call sign, and now you're operating as an amateur radio operator under Part 97. So it depends. If you're operating Shares, WinLink can make your share service the only thing you see. If you're operating amateur radio, likewise, it can make it the only thing you see. There are instances in exercises where the agency would request that you operate both. They may have an inject that ask you to operate on the ham bands to do a particular thing, and then move over and operate Shares to do something else. So to answer your question, it just depends on what the activity is, but you can utilize both.
Okay,
Steve, I
okay,
think
all
he
right.
was asking, I think he was asking about an RMS. An RMS has
That
to either be
RMS,
either
you
shares or
cannot
ham.
share I'm sorry. It's muffled here for some reason, but an RMS, you can use a separate radio message server for Shares and a separate radio message server for amateur radio. You can put them on the same computer. You just can't mix the frequencies and the same tri-mode software and the same relay software for both services.
Okay, that answers my question because that's where I was stuck. Thank you. Thanks
Sure.
Thanks for the presentation.
Sure.
Bill,
This-
did you want to add anything else?
Stake,
No, I think Steve did a great job, and I think he covered everything. Certainly, at one point, and Steve talked about the fact that we have far fewer restrictions under shares. For example, the ability to encrypt messages. But one of the big advantages of shares is we have so many more channels. You know, in the ham bands with the US FCC rules, we are so tightly restricted as to the frequency space we have to operate with WinLink, whereas with shares, we have a greatly expanded space. I think Steve said 100 or more separate channels on shares. I mean, that's a mind-boggling compared to what we have
Let's
available.
look at it.
frequency-wise.
Let's put it in a specific. On 40 meters, the Part 97.221B allows Pactor 4 or Pactor 3 or very high speed to operate on a 5 kilohertz bandwidth spectrum. Okay, well, Vera wide is 2.75 kilohertz. Pactor 4 and Pactor 3 are 2.4 kilohertz, and you've got a whopping 5 kilohertz to operate. There are over 200 radio message servers on the ham bands on 40 meters, scanning 24 times 7. If a heavy duty emergency took place, where a lot of those would be in operation, you would have to move off of that frequency onto somewhere else and ask for a waiver after the fact. The point is that there's just no place for that in the amateur service. It wasn't designed that way. The interest has moved it that way. And I think that in the future, most likely, the agencies that I keep talking about will migrate that one way or the other over to become more of a MCOM-oriented possibility, but right now it's not. So you're looking at 5 kilohertz on 40 meters, and with shares, you're looking at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, all the way up to 27 megahertz, multiple frequencies on each of those megahertz, up to 3 kilohertz bandwidth, even more so, with the capability of running full duplex simultaneously, all kinds of options available that are not available in the amateur service. And it's designed that way. If we want to change it, we have to write a notice proposal for rulemaking like we did to get Pactor 4 and beat the death out of the process until we get what we want. But right now, things are the way they are.
Okay, Dan, you had your head up for a while. You want to take it away?
Yeah, hello. So I've got two questions and maybe three, depending on the answer to the second one. So we've been talking about shares and its nexus with government entities, but is it safe to say that all 15 of the emergency service functions, including industry partners that serve each of them, can acquire shares call signs?
Well, any agency has a myriad of ESF functions, emergency service functions, whether it be hazmat, medical, or communication. So the answer is it doesn't make any difference. It just happens to be the ESF2 is the man that or the woman that manages it. There's a lady on here tonight who's managing the 6th largest country in the world HF program right now, co-managing. And she's doing a wonderful job. She's the ESF2 for a particular district in California, but she's not just managing ESF2 in these agencies. She's managing the communication that comes out of these agencies, regardless of what the communication content is. It could be anything. I hope that answers your question.
Not quite, because I don't remember all 15 of them, but the issues of hospitals and electrical distribution
Doesn't
services.
matter.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter what it is.
I just want
Whether
to,
it could be empty in the waste paper basket. If it needs a communication, it's up to the agency to provide that communication.
okay, got that. And so I thought I heard you say that all communications on shares must be encrypted.
No, I said
Okay.
all communication transmission on shares has a capability of
Bingo.
encrypted.
Okay.
All the radio message servers are encrypted. That we got gratis, obviously. Vera, when you put Vera on shares, you check a box and you get transmission encryption. You forget about it. And is that important? Well, it depends. I mean, nobody wants to see body counts. Some states, it's illegal for the press to provide information that doesn't come from, it's a criminal offense that doesn't come from a PIO, an official PIO. Other states just hope. But frankly, there is confidential communication and restricted content that goes over these systems, and the fact that there's a ES-256 encryption without spending a fortune is a near miracle, especially when you're using one of the best government standards that's available today.
Yeah, thank you. I was just trying to emphasize the fact that where encryption is needed, it's available. And for non-governmental entities, if they don't want to use it, or even some governmental entities that I've seen not using encrypted traffic.
Okay, no, we're not encrypting the message. We're just encrypting the transmission.
Right. That's an important point, by the way.
Of
Okay.
course.
Thank
Now,
you very
and, if an agency wants to provide their own flavor of encryption, WinLink has the capability of allowing that to happen, and they just have to do it. Very few agencies encrypt messages. Mars is the biggest one I know, but very few authorities having jurisdiction, civil, military, whatever. I have not run into that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to pull out things that maybe haven't come up already in the discussion. So thanks a lot. All good answers.
Sure.
Okay, let's jump over to Barry. Barry, you got anything in the chat?
Bill from Washington wants to know, they're a home rule state and his county is not currently involved with shares. Who does his DEM contact to start getting involved with shares in Washington state?
Where is he in Washington state?
Bill, can you come on and give the answer? HC7SR?
I'm here in Centralia, Lewis County.
Okay.
Okay, my advice would be to get hold of Scott Dakers, Dakers, with the Washington Division of Emergency Management. Whatever they call them, what's the military? I don't remember what they call it, but the Washington EMD, Scott Dakers, and ask him. There's another man you could ask that's in a county right above Seattle named Scott Honecker. I don't know if you know either one of those gentlemen, but if you contact me directly at winlink@comcast.net, I will give you their contact information, and they can lead you to where you want to be, hopefully.
Okay, I've already been in contact with Scott, so thank you much.
Sure.
Peter from New York wants your contact information so he can contact you offline. Do you want to share that or not?
Yeah, winlink@comcast.net.
Okay.
Might put that in chat there, if you would.
What, no WinLink address?
Some of the things that I get, you don't want over WinLink.
Yeah, I could send you shares WinLink too.
All right, you might put your information there in the chat there for everybody. Okay, Barry, how we doing?
I am thinking that we look, okay, Phil put Steve's email address in the chat.
I put it in there. It's there. Last message.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Okay, yep, we're good in chat.
Okay, well, let's look around for any more hands to go up. Any more questions out there, comments, whatever?
The most difficult part of all of this is the relationship building with the agency, because you're not putting your knowledge online, you're putting yourself online. Your ego, your self-esteem, everything about yourself you're putting online, and you could get rejected. It's like when I was younger, I went out and I asked for a job, and the guy said to me, "Are you kidding? I would not consider. You you haven't got a chance. Get out of here." So there's two actions I could take. One, I could go home, uh, take a swig of something and pull the shades down and get depressed. Or the other thing I could do is just look at myself in the mirror and say, "Hey, Steve, everything stayed the same. You just have new information." So that's the hardest part, in my opinion, of getting involved in all this, is walking into an agency where the guy knows what you want before you even open your mouth and making an impression.
Okay, Carolyn, you got your hand up there, lady. You want to come aboard?
Yes, thank you so much, Steve, for a great presentation. Excuse my voice. Is Oxcom training a requirement for being a sheriff's operator?
No, no, there is no requirement to be a shares operator other than being involved with an agency.
Okay.
It's up to the agency that you're involved with to set those parameters. A lot of agencies will set none. A lot of agencies will set very stringent. Phil Shared, who's in our Windling development team, who's spoken 2 or 3 times tonight, is a computer whiz. He wrote he's updated all of the software that anybody uses with Windlink. And he also is a certified ComL. He went through the training. He has participated with Tennessee Emergency Management Agency and Williamson County Emergency Management. He's taught ham classes. He's done it all. But if you ask him if he would become a if he would go out and become a ComL in an incident, he would tell you he's not qualified. With all of his credentials, he would be the first one to say, "Whoa, not me." So that's the kind of person that those people are looking for. They're looking for people who have the information and will do the work that needs to be done. And Phil is a perfect example of that.
Well, one of the things that, and our state ESF2 told me was that in a lot of situations, especially in small counties, if you want to be the man, they'll let you be the man. But when you're the man, you're the one who takes the responsibility and the blame when things go south.
Yeah, you can become a zero from a hero in a flash.
Well, there can be a lot of liability issues and a lot of nightmares if things don't go well and you're the one in charge.
For example, let's say I've got a county government, and the county government says there's been a flood and there's no water available to drink. So you request water from the state and they bring a tanker with water in it when what you need are bottled water to pass out to the community.
Mm-hmm.
And you forgot to tell them that. You're a zero, not a hero. So it just depends. I mean, that's why the training is there. That's why you exercise. There's nothing like actually doing the work over and over again. It's just like riding the bicycle. You can be a PhD in physics and
And I
know
even
all
mentioned
about
that-
how to ride a bicycle, but if you haven't been on one, you're going to fall. If you're 5 years old and you can't read, you put him on a bicycle for 20 minutes and he's jumping curbs. Its concept cannot replace experience.
Steve, one other thing, and that is in emergency communication, at the end of it, if things didn't go well, there can be a lot of finger pointing, and in the bad cases, lawsuits as well. We've had a case of that in Tennessee. One of the nice things about WinLink is the fact that there's a record of all messages sent and received. So if someone says, we need a penicillin at the shelter, and you send in a request for penicillin, and you've got a hard copy record in WinLink Express of the message where you requested penicillin. Well, if the penicillin doesn't arrive, at least you've got proof that you ordered it. You know, if you did that by voice and said, well, I ordered the penicillin, and the other side said, no, we didn't get any order for penicillin, you don't have any way to prove you ordered penicillin, can put you in a difficult position.
Yeah, and you can also fill out your 214 log and put it on WinLink.
Having those puppies.
Which would have all of that information.
Mhm.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day, especially Finn and even the guys, even the people on the West Coast. Much appreciated. And if anybody has any questions that I can answer, right or wrong, I'd be happy to do that at any time. You got the email address. I'll
All
send
right.
them to Phil.
That sounds good to me.
So you were great in the chat helping me. Steve, it was very interesting. Thank everybody for coming.
I have to add that Phil and Greg are geniuses when it comes to robust programming and testing. I spent 30 plus years as a federal programmer, started out as, and I've never seen such acuity and responsibility anywheres.
You know,
So-
Dan there, WL7COO, is also NNH6CA, a shares RMS. And after spending 30 years in the government, talk about self-abuse. Here he is as a volunteer working with the federal government again. And I commend you for that.
Well, but I'm learning about WinLink every single day. And it's like I get to get back at the federal government by providing them a free service.
Okay, are there more questions out there before we start closing this down, folks?
We're good in chat.
Yeah,
Okay.
Doc, I appreciate you showing up here.
All right, we're going to say 73s, everyone. Been a great presentation. Thanks, Steve, for coming on and doing that. And see you all down the line, but folks, 73s.